Hello and welcome to Soothing Pod's Sleep Stories. I am Chris, and tonight we journey deep into the heart of South America, where rivers wind like silver threads, mountains rise like ancient sentinels, and a whisper of gold lingers over sacred lakes. We will follow the legends of El Dorado, the lost city of gold, through sacred rituals, daring explorers, and the timeless wisdom of the land's first people. Along the way, we will discover that some treasures cannot be held in hands, but live forever in memory, imagination, and the quiet magic of the world around us. Across the northern reaches of South America, the morning begins in a hush. Thin veils of mist slip between the buttressed roots of ancient trees, and the first light glints upon leaves heavy with dew. The forest does not wake all at once. It stirs in murmurs. A distant splash along a riverbank, a low flutter of wings in the canopy, a single cry of a hidden bird before it fades back into shadow. Everything moves slowly here, as though time itself is softened by moisture and green. Far beyond sight, rivers wind like silver threads across valleys and basins. They rise in cold mountain springs and descend through clouded passes, gathering tributaries and memories as they go. Some flow toward the Orinoco, others toward the Amazon, and still others vanish into marshland and reeds. The waterways form a labyrinth older than any map, their courses bending not by design, but by patience, for the people who lived alongside them. These rivers were not borders or obstacles. They were paths, quiet, unhurried, and alive. Long before any stranger looked upon the land with curiosity or hunger, the region pulsed with civilizations whose stories travelled not in written lines, but in rituals, in traded goods, and in spoken law. Along plateaus and fertile valleys, villages traded emeralds and precious metals for salt, textiles, and food. Trails crossed high savannas and dipped into warm lowlands, linking peoples who knew the land by scent, sound, and season. The mountains in the distance, pale blue beneath the rising sun, carried their own secrets. Among them, clouds drifted like a slow procession, unraveling and reforming along crags and peaks. At night, those same mountains glittered with stars that seemed closer than anywhere else, as though one might reach up and touch them, if only they dared to climb high enough. Legends lingered there, quiet and unannounced, folded into the ridges and valleys. Yet, it was not only the mountains or forests that kept their mysteries. Lakes lay still as mirrors, and lagoons rested in basins surrounded by reeds that rustled at the slightest breeze. The waters held reflections that could deceive the eye. One moment green, the next a luminous gold beneath the sun. The travelers who watched from the shore, the shimmer looked almost like metal, a fleeting glint, a suggestion of something precious beneath the surface. Though no one spoke of treasure then. The land offered no promises, only wonder. It asked nothing in return but attention. And for those who listened long enough, whispers seemed to rise from the forest floor. Stories of ancestors, of ceremonies, and of a gilded figure whose presence once graced the shores of a sacred lake. The whisper did not yet name him. It waited. The legend was not ready to reveal itself, not until the era of rituals and gold dust arrived with the dawn of the next age. In the highlands, where cool winds drift across wide plateaus, a people known as the Muisca shaped a world of their own. Their villages stood near lakes held sacred for generations, where the smooth waters were treated not as scenery, but as thresholds, quiet places where the human and the divine might exchange promises. The Muisca traded salt, fine textiles, emeralds, and crafted gold with meticulous skill. Gold to them was not merely a symbol of wealth. It was sunlight made tangible, a metal that echoed the warmth of the sky. It was offered, not hoarded. Gift meant for gods and ancestors, rather than vaults or strong boxes. In the form of small tuños, delicate figures shaped of metal, it carried prayers into the depths of still water when a new chief rose to power. The moment was sealed by ceremony rather than proclamation. According to the most enduring account, chosen successor underwent purification, fasting and honoring the spirits before the final rite. At dawn, as the first rays stretched across the plains, the young leader stood upon a raft worked from reeds and wood. Priests attended him, carrying bowls of resins and powders that sweetened the air with smoke. Musicians beat drums that seemed to mark not time, but intention. Before the raft pushed from shore, a chief was coated in fine gold dust until his skin shone with a soft radiance. The powder clung to him like a second dawn, glimmering against the water's surface as he stepped aboard. The raft floated toward the center of the sacred lake, one said to lie near the settlements of what is now central Colombia, while the crowd remained silent on the shore. When the vessel reached its appointed place, offerings were cast into the lake. Gold figures, emeralds, and other treasures fell through the water, leaving ripples that widened outward before fading. Only then did the chief slip beneath the surface, letting the golden dust dissolve and scatter into the depths. The ritual affirmed authority, not through dominion, but through communion, binding the leader to land, people, and spirit. This figure, the gilded man, was known to the Muisca, celebrated in quiet reverence, and retold through generations. But in time, the story would leave its homeland and transform as it traveled. The ceremony's meaning would shift beneath the weight of foreign tongues. The gilded man would become a city, then a kingdom, and finally a dream of boundless riches. Yet, in its earliest telling, there was no city of gold, only a man gleaming in the morning light, and a lake that swallowed treasures without ever returning them. From this ritual, rumor would one day take flight, though no one here could yet imagine how far it would roam, nor how fiercely it would reshape the imaginations of distant empires. Decades later, across an ocean and far from the lakes and plateaus of the Muisca, whispers of the gilded man crossed into Spanish ears. They arrived not as complete stories, but as fragments spoken by intermediaries, merchants, messengers, and soldiers who carried news from the New World with the same casualness as they carried letters or parcels. The fragments fascinated more than they informed. A man covered in gold dust, treasures offered to water, a chieftain who glittered like the dawn. In Spain and its territories, the tale stirred curiosity. The early 1500s were years when the unfamiliar lands of the Americas seemed to offer both promise and perplexity. Ships returned to European harbors, laden with silver, exotic goods, and accounts of peoples and customs previously unknown. Each story embroidered upon another, forming a tapestry of wonder that made ordinary cities feel too small for the dreams now taking shape within them. The rumor of a gilded man soon grew taller than its origin. Some heard it as proof that entire realms must be adorned with gold. Places where streets gleamed and palaces shone brighter than the cathedrals of Castile. Others imagined kingdoms where wealth spilled as easily as grain, waiting only for the bold to gather it. Few paused to consider that gold might hold ceremonial meaning rather than economic value. In Europe, treasure was counted, weighed, and stored. In the Americas, treasure could be sung, offered, or dissolved beneath a lake's surface. Explorers and conquistadors listened with intent. Among them were men such as Gonzalo Jimenez de Quesada and Sebastián de Belalcázar, who would later carve their names into the history of the northern Andes. Rumor reached them as incentive, a suggestion that beyond the mountains, or perhaps between them, lay riches unclaimed by any crown. The hunger for such riches did not yet inspire full expeditions, but it stirred preparations. Maps were redrawn, supplies gathered, and alliances debated. What had once been a ritual meant to sanctify power became a catalyst for ambition. Letters crossed desks and tables with hurried strokes of ink, their contents filled with speculation rather than certainty. The gilded man was no longer just a leader adorned for a sacred purpose. He was becoming a legend shaped by distance and desire. Soon, a question was not whether the story was true, but where the source of such wealth could be found. And with that question came another, more enticing thought. If a single man could shine with gold, what might an entire city hold? Soon enough, ships would slip out of harbours once more, their sails filled by wind and the hope of discovery. A quest for El Dorado. Though no one yet called it by that name, was gathering momentum, pulling men toward lands they did not yet understand. When the first expeditions set out from the northern Andes, they carried less certainty than hope. Supply wagons rattled over stony ground. Horses stamped impatiently, and guides traced routes that had been walked by indigenous traders long before the Spaniards arrived. Much of the land ahead remained unmapped in European eyes, though it was neither empty nor unknown to those who had always lived there. Gonzalo Jimenez de Quesada led one of the earliest major ventures in search of the rumoured riches. His men travelled along river valleys that unfolded mile after mile, the banks thick with vegetation that clung to the water's edge. Rain came in sudden bursts, drumming on leather and steel before drifting off as though nothing had happened. It was a region defined not by one feature, but by change. Uplands melting into plains, plains dissolving into wetlands, and wetlands feeding into slow-moving streams. The deeper the group travelled, the more the promise of treasure drifted between possibility and mirage. Every so often, word reached them of settlements that produced fine goldwork, nose rings, pendants, and ceremonial ornaments crafted with extraordinary skill. The Muisca were known for such artistry, yet their wealth was not gathered in vaults or hidden chambers. It existed in adornment, ritual, and trade, not in hoards waiting to be seized. Still, the thought lingered that more lay beyond the next ridge. Each region offered new directions and new rumors of a chieftain who bathed in gold dust, of offerings cast into a lake, of kingdoms that shimmered beneath the sun. The stories rarely align, but no one found reason to dismiss them. In an age where the world seemed larger with every passing month, even inconsistencies felt like invitations. Other expeditions pushed eastward and southward, drawn to toward the vast drainage basins of the Orinoco and Amazon. Boats replaced horses, paddles replaced reins, and the soundscape shifted once again. The men listened to the steady dip of oars and the muted rustle of river reeds. Nights were long and still, broken only by murmured conversations about what might lie beyond the bend. The rivers carried them forward with neither urgency nor delay. Hardship accompanied the journey. Yet, in this telling, it remained a quiet companion rather than a torment. The explorers learned to mend their own gear, to read the sky for storms, and to trade for food when their supplies ran thin. The land offered lessons without cruelty, its challenges more a matter of unfamiliarity than malice. But even as the expedition advanced, the object of the search never came into view. The gilded man continued to exist only in rumor, ever beyond reach, suggesting that if such wealth existed, it must lie farther still. And so, the thought of a single man adorned in gold began to shift again in the collective imagination. Perhaps there was not one gilded figure, but a realm of them. Perhaps not a ritual, but a city. The unknown had not yet answered, and so the stories grew bolder. As expeditions pushed deeper into the vast landscapes of South America, the idea of El Dorado began to change. No longer tied to a single lake or a solitary gilded man, the dream of gold became a city, an entire kingdom whose streets and palaces might gleam brighter than any European imagination could conceive. Each new rumor transported the city farther, reshaping it with each telling, always just beyond reach. Some claim it lay nestled in the Andes, hidden behind sheer cliffs and waterfalls that fell into mist-shrouded valleys. Others whispered of plains so wide that the horizon seemed endless, where rivers shone like molten metal under the midday sun. Occasionally, a map would mark a location, only to vanish from memory or be contradicted by new testimony. The city's position moved as if guided by the wind itself, never fixed, always enticing. Explorers became accustomed to this shifting promise. They asked indigenous guides about settlements of immense wealth, watched sunlight glinting on distant mountains and interpreted every shimmer on the water as a possible sign. In doing so, the legend expanded. Towns that once seemed ordinary were elevated in stories to realms of gold. Lakes and rivers became mirrors reflecting imagined splendor. Even the smallest trinket, a golden pendant or an ornament inlaid with emerald, could ignite visions of entire streets paved with gold. European ambition intertwined with hope. Letters home described cities that might contain palaces and temples beyond belief. Yet, the writers always qualified their claims, noting that the city was hidden, vast, and unlike any known land. With each account, El Dorado became not merely a place, but an idea, a destination defined by possibility and desire, where treasure was not just tangible, but a symbol of ultimate achievement. Yet, for every map, for every expedition that departed with resolve, disappointment followed. Rivers proved longer than expected, mountains steeper. Settlements offered hospitality, but no unclaimed treasure. Guides grew weary of repeated journeys, and men began to grasp that the city, if it existed, remained elusive, a phantom shimmering just beyond reach. Still, the legend refused to fade. Each failed search only reinforced its allure. The city might be lost, invisible to those who sought it in haste. Yet its image persisted in the imagination, reshaped and brightened by every retelling. In a land of rivers and mountains, of forests and plains, a city that never was became eternal, not in stone or gold, but in the desire it inspired. And so, the explorers pressed on, drawn ever onward by glimpses of light on distant ridges, by currents carrying them deeper into the unknown, and by the thought that perhaps the next river bend, the next hidden valley, might finally reveal the fabled city of gold. Amid the high plains of central Colombia, one lake drew attention above all others. Its waters were still, almost unnervingly calm, reflecting the sky in colors that shifted with the day. From soft grey at dawn, shimmering turquoise beneath the noon sun. Locals spoke of it in hushed tones, calling it sacred, a place where the spirits of ancestors lingered, and where offerings could vanish beneath the surface without leaving a trace. This was Lake Guatavita, where the ritual of the Gilded Man had once been performed. The lake's banks were lined with reeds and steep cliffs, and its surface often appeared to float between worlds, neither fully land nor sky. Generations of Muisca had offered gold and emeralds into its depths, not for personal gain, but as devotion, as prayers manifested in metal. Tiny figures, puños, and other treasures had settled on the lake bed, their precise locations hidden from all but those who knew the water's moods. When news of these offerings reached Europe, the lake became a focal point for adventurers and treasure seekers. Men returned, drawn by the thought of riches, and some attempted to drain its waters. Wooden sluices and rudimentary dams were built, channels dug to lower the level, and the lake was scoured for anything that gleamed. In these efforts, fragments of gold did appear, small figures, ceremonial ornaments, even tiny bells, but never the immense wealth that maps and rumor promised. Each attempt revealed enough to excite hope, yet never enough to satisfy desire. What distinguished Guatavita is not the amount of gold, but the story it held. Travelers who approached its banks often recorded more than the potential treasures. They noted the haunting stillness, the way mist gathered in layers over its surface, and how the sun could strike the water at just the right angle to make it appear molten. The lake seemed alive, aware of those who sought to claim what had been offered in reverence. Even as explorers came and went, the rituals of the past remained undisturbed in memory. The Gilded Man had vanished into legend, but the lake preserved his story, carrying echoes of gold dust dissolved and scattered in water. Each ripple seemed to whisper of devotion, of authority, and of a world where wealth was not measured in accumulation, but in participation, an exchange between human and spirit, offering and acceptance. The allure of Lake Guatavita endured. It became a bridge between history and imagination, between ritual and conquest. For those who ventured near its shores, the lake was a reminder that some treasures, though tangible, were never truly meant to be possessed. And in that delicate tension between what could be seen and what could only be imagined, the legend of El Dorado grew ever brighter. shimmering on the edge of memory and aspiration. In the closing years of the 16th century, across the Atlantic and into the dense forests of northern South America, Sir Walter Raleigh embarked on a voyage that would enter the annals of legend. In 1595, he sailed toward the land of Guyana, following rumors of a city called Manoa, said to gleam with gold and wealth beyond imagination. His expedition traced rivers that twisted through unknown terrain, their waters dark and slow, reflecting skies that shifted from pale dawn to fiery sunset. Canoes and rafts drifted past reeds and floodplains, while distant waterfalls sent mist curling upward, scattering light like liquid jewels. Raleigh recorded every sight with meticulous attention, not only noting gold or trade, but describing the land itself. Hills rising in layers of green, clouds gathering above plateaued valleys, and the dense forest stretching uninterrupted. A world both alive and enigmatic. He wrote of rivers so wide they seemed endless, of quiet lagoons where sunlight dappled the surface, and of birds whose calls echoed in ways unfamiliar to European ears. Each page captured the sensation of being in a place uncharted by European knowledge, a land that resisted simple conquest or comprehension. Yet, within Raleigh's journals, embellishment crept gently into fact. Stories of gleaming cities, vast streets paved with gold, and palaces lined with precious metals stirred the imagination of Europe. His writings, circulated widely, ensured that the legend of El Dorado would flourish. What had once been a ritual, a gilded man on a sacred lake, now became a kingdom, a city, a dream that existed as vividly in minds as it did in distant forests. Even as Europeans pursued gold, the land's original custodians held different views. For the Muisca and neighboring peoples, wealth was measured not in hoarded metal, but in its sacred and symbolic significance. Gold was sunlight made tangible, a reflection of life and divine presence, while emeralds were believed to be tears of the gods, each stone imbued with stories and reverence. Offerings were crafted, carried, and deposited not for personal gain, but as communication with the spirit world. Metal was a medium, a language, rather than currency to be accumulated. The contrast between these understandings was profound. Europeans measured value by weight, hoard, and trade, while indigenous perspectives valued the ritual, the gesture, and the connection to ancestry and land. To them, gold's worth was inseparable from its purpose. It shimmered not as a prize, but as part of a cycle of respect, devotion, and harmony with nature. The sacred rituals, once glimpsed only through rumor and fragmentary accounts, were testimony to a worldview in which wealth flowed through relationships, not ledgers, as Rayleigh paddled through rivers and wrote of distant shores, and as the Muisca performed their ceremonies on tranquil lakes. Two narratives intertwined without ever fully touching. The legend of El Dorado grew in Europe, solidified by journal entries and maps, yet its roots remained in the sacred waters, in golden dust dissolved and scattered, and in the quiet wisdom of those who had always known the land's true treasures. One told of ambition, the other of devotion. Together, they shaped the enduring image of a city that could never be found, but would always exist in imagination and reverence. As centuries passed, the search for El Dorado shifted from rivers and mountains to imagination itself. By the Age of Enlightenment, explorers and scholars alike recognized that the city of gold might not exist as they had once hoped. Maps marked with bold lines and impossible claims gave way to measured surveys. Yet the story did not fade. Instead, El Dorado transformed from a literal city of streets paved with gold to a symbol of desire, ambition, and the unknown. In Europe, it became a metaphor for the pursuit of wealth, knowledge, and the uncharted reaches of both land and mind. Writers, poets, and philosophers wove the legend into literature and conversation. Some treated it as a cautionary tale, a reminder that obsession could drive men to hardship and despair. Others embraced it as inspiration, proof that even the faintest rumor could ignite exploration and discovery. The city, elusive and ever-shifting, became a mirror for human aspiration, a dream that could exist without a foundation, yet shape the actions of those who believed in it. Meanwhile, in the lands of its origin, the story persisted in different forms. Indigenous communities continued to honor their lakes, mountains, and rituals. The original meanings preserved quietly through generations. artifact once offered to sacred waters remained, hidden or retrieved by archaeologists. Each piece a fragment of a culture whose sophistication rivaled the grandest European kingdoms. Golden tuños, ceremonial ornaments, and emeralds told stories of devotion and artistry rather than conquest. In these objects, the spiritual wealth of a people endured, untouched by the European notion of accumulation. By the 19th and 20th centuries, modern archaeology brought a new perspective. Scholars studied sites across Colombia, piecing together evidence of the Muisca civilization and their practices. Excavations at lakes such as Guatavita revealed ceremonial artifacts, confirming that gold had been used in ritual and not hoarded in massive troves. Although no city of gold was ever found, the discoveries illuminated a rich and complex society, offering insight into the meaning behind the legend. Museums preserved these treasures, and visitors could witness, in the delicate reflection of metal and stone, the cultural depth that had inspired centuries of myth. El Dorado's endurance was not rooted in discovery alone. Its power lay in the stories it inspired, the journeys it prompted, and the questions it raised about wealth, purpose, and imagination. To some, it remained a city waiting to be uncovered. To others, it was a dream more luminous than any tangible prize. Rivers, mountains, and forests, once traveled by explorers, continued to flow and grow, indifferent to human desire, their landscapes preserving both history and mystery. Even today, the legend persists, carried in literature, films, and collective memory. It reminds those who encounter it that some treasures are not found in vaults or on maps, but in curiosity, respect, and understanding of worlds beyond one's own. The story of El Dorado is thus both enduring and transformative, a reflection of ambition, a testament to spiritual and cultural wealth, and a reminder that some dreams live most vividly when they are unreachable. In that, the city never truly dies. It lives in memory, imagination, and the quiet persistence of human wonder. Though centuries have passed since the first whispers of gold crossed oceans and rivers, the legend of El Dorado continues to endure, not as a destination, but as a dream. The city never materialized as explorers imagined, yet it lives in stories, in the pursuit of the unknown, and in the imagination of those who have listened to its whispers. Across lands once mapped and explored, the idea of the city has traveled further than any footstep, carried in thought and memory long after rivers have shifted course and mountains have worn away. The landscapes that first inspired curiosity remain steadfast and indifferent. Rivers wind silently through forests, reflecting the sky as they have for millennia. Mountains rise in quiet grandeur, clouds settling along their ridges in slow, deliberate rhythms. Lakes, once the sites of sacred rituals, glimmer beneath the sun with a light that seems to hold both promise and mystery. Nature does not reveal its secrets quickly, nor does it yield them entirely. And perhaps this is what makes a legend eternal. The tension between what is sought and what remains just beyond reach. For the people of the land, past and present, El Dorado was never only gold. It was a reflection of devotion, creativity, and the sacred connection between humanity and the world. The Muisca's offerings to lakes, the careful crafting of golden figures, and the reverence shown in rituals all endure as quiet testimony. These acts, once misunderstood by distant explorers as mere pursuit of treasure, reveal a different wealth, one measured in meaning, memory, and the bonds between generations. To those who have traveled in search of it, the city became a mirror desire. Maps and journals carried European ambition across uncharted waters, and for every river bend or mountain pass, hopes rose and fell. Yet, even in failure, the story grew stronger. It shifted, adapting to time and imagination, until El Dorado was no longer bound to geography. It became a symbol of longing, a reminder that some treasures exist not to be possessed, but to inspire. And so, the legend reaches its quiet conclusion in the stillness of the landscape. Forests continue to breathe, rivers continue to flow, and the mountains hold their secrets with patient dignity. The wind moves over plains and valleys, stirring leaves, rippling water, and scattering sunlight as if to carry the story onward. In the play of light on emeralds and gold artifacts preserved in museums, in the reflections of lakes that once held offerings, The city persists in memory, unclaimed yet luminous. Perhaps the greatest treasure is this: the enduring capacity of a story to shape thought, to inspire journeys, and to remind humanity that not all wealth can be measured by hands. Some riches are held in wonder, some in reverence, and some in the quiet understanding that the pursuit itself transforms those who seek. The rivers sleep beneath stars that have witnessed generations. The forests whisper in ancient voices, and the mountains stand timeless, cradling a city that will never be found, yet will never fade. El Dorado lives in imagination, in reverence, and in the quiet spaces between earth and sky. It is both lost and eternal, a reminder that some dreams are too precious to be possessed, and that in longing lies a wealth far beyond gold. I hope you enjoyed tonight's story, and that it has brought you a night of peaceful, restful sleep. Please join me again tomorrow night for another sleep story. Until then, sweet dreams.